Today's podcast is brought to you by Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. If your property gets damaged by a storm, it's nice to know there's a Kentucky Farm Bureau insurance agent in your hometown who's committed to making things right. Rain or shine, you can count on the great coverage and personal service you expect from Kentucky's insurance company. To request a free quote, find your local KFB insurance agent at mykfbagent.com. Kentucky Farm Bureau, big on commitment. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Been good. I've been watching the World Cup.
You a soccer guy now?
You know, I grew up a soccer guy, and then I kind of, realized it's maybe not so fun sometimes, but
it's a fun sport to play. Tough watch sometimes.
It's a tough watch.
It's
right.
a tough watch.
I think
Some have
fun.
compared it to paint drying.
When I was a kid, I played.
That's different.
Yeah. So Tim's here.
Timmy.
Thoughts?
Hey,
Are you a soccer or a football?
I got a soccer story for you.
Okay, all right.
Oh.
Back in my newspaper days, my editor sent me to cover a soccer game.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I don't know anything about soccer.
Mm-hmm.
He said, just write down what the coach tells you. Okay. So I get there, and it didn't take me long to figure out I needed to just stand in one spot rather than run up and down the field trying to catch a good photo because they were always going to come back to me.
They always come back.
And,
back and forth.
And so after, I ran and ran and ran, and when I couldn't run anymore, I thought, I'm just going to stand here. So anyway, game ends. Our home team lost. I went to the coach, and he was furious about something. And so I couldn't repeat anything he said.
Right.
Oh, yeah, you'll have that.
Yeah, I thought, what am I, So I managed to work my way through it, but I didn't have to cover soccer again.
Yeah.
So, reason we bring up soccer, the World Cup is in the Americas technically, but let's be honest, we got 95% of the sites. It's in the U.S.
Yes.
And it's our birthday year, in case anyone hasn't heard 800 times this year.
Uh-huh.
And what better time to bring the rest of the world to the U.S. and break all stereotypes and then kind of just sit in some of them. Some of them were just like, no, we do have that. Come on and tell me it's not good. Come on.
Yeah.
It's been entertaining.
The social media around the World Cup isn't even about the World Cup. It's about all these folks coming to America and trying things that are very day-to-day to us.
There are some things I wish I could tell them. Like, if I had to tell you what to try when you land, I wouldn't have started with Taco Bell for your gut's sake. Like, I would have probably eased in. Like, maybe the ranch dressing would have been a great start on a salad.
Yeah, ranch dressing.
Ranch dressing has suddenly become... Who knew that it wasn't in the rest of the world?
I didn't know they didn't have ranch dressing.
They're literally boxing this stuff up and shipping it home. They like it so much. These folks coming in for the World Cup.
The Kraft folks are going to go nuts here selling ranch dressing overseas.
They're going to kill it.
Do you think that on an airplane, like, you know how they have like alcohol and regular drinks in smaller containers? Do you think they're going to start like giving that as an option? Because they're drinking it.
They're
so like, do you think they're going to be like, if you look on your drink menu, there's also Hidden Valley. For a small fee, we will take
ranch.
Apple Pay.
I saw a guy from, I think he's from Korea, trying Texas barbecue, and he had the biggest rib I've ever seen.
Is that the one that you tried to use a fork and a knife, and the man that worked there said, no, stop.
Just go. Yeah.
I need you to quit.
And it was the best. This guy was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest.
I also didn't know the rest of the world didn't have barbecue. Like, I thought they'd figured.
Yeah. Barbecue.
So is it sauces? Is that what nobody knows what to do?
Yeah,
like,
we sauce a lot, I think. So, yeah.
Pretty saucy people.
Yeah, we're pretty saucy
Pretty
people.
saucy.
Yeah, like that. The guy went to Texas Roadhouse. He's talked about the rolls.
He said, "Why are Americans unhappy? You have Texas Roadhouse."
You have Texas Roadhouse. It's simmered up.
So funny.
And then people getting free refills, which is I didn't know that.
Oh,
That's not a thing. Apparently.
Yeah,
like they're really excited that they just walk up and pour it in their cup and
Got another story for you.
Okay.
1997. I know y'all weren't born yet.
I was 3.
I was 17.
I was in France.
Yeah.
And getting a good old Coca-Cola sometimes is difficult. And when you can, it's very expensive. So finally, my wife and I were at this little cafe, and the waitress says, I ordered a Coke. And she said, do you want ice in that? Which is like unheard of. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, yes. It had been days since I had a Coke on ice.
Yeah.
Do you want a large? Oh, absolutely.
Bring it on.
I'm American.
Supersize me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then I got the bill. The Coke costs more than the meal did.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Man, it was really good.
Was it worth
Yeah.
it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so there's two that are my favorites on the internet. Okay. There's just so many.
Yeah.
Okay, the Scottish fan base is called the Tartan Army, and they're wearing kilts just everywhere.
Yes.
And now they're in Miami. They were in Boston. I feel like Boston was good for them. It's a good temperature climate. They are taking the kilts south, and I do wonder if we've got enough air vents. I don't know if they're ready for what they're about to hit in Miami.
Yeah.
So they've been entertaining, but there has been a post that keeps going around the internet this week, and it's I feel like for our 250th birthday, our parents finally let all of our cousins come over, and even though that our parents don't get along and we've never met them before, and we're all hanging out now. And I was like, that is the funniest thing I've ever heard, because all these people are like, why have you guys said so many bad things about America? Like, these people are really nice. Like, this food's really good.
Yeah, there was a Swedish group went to a Bass Pro Shop, and they just walk in because Bass Pro Shop is cool. Mostly just because it's cool. Like, it's huge.
Right.
You got an aquarium in the middle of the thing. You got all these taxidermied animals everywhere. So they come in and they're just like, what? And they bought every cheesy thing that you could, from the hat, the big trucker hat with Bass Pro Shop that, everybody's got to have. They see all this stuff online, and these Americans having these things. They bought every trendy, I guess you'd say, is more than anything. But yeah, the Bass Pro Shop one was really
That one's pretty good.
Yeah.
Have you seen the fans from Norway?
Are they the ones that row?
They do the roll thing.
Yeah, on the escalator. Did you see them going up the escalator? Yeah.
They filled Times Square, and they're all out there doing that.
And I didn't understand.
It's so cool.
They do it with a drum. Like, I know in the real, back then, we had a drum to keep them on beat. I didn't know that a drunken fan base still had a guy. They were like, no, keep him okay. He needs to be the drum.
He's the drummer.
He's got to keep us in check. And he's in the front, and they're rowing Times Square.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a 3% Scandinavian blood, so I was really into it.
23 and me over here.
23 and me. Well, none of these freedoms, these amazing freedoms we have in this country, would have happened without our forefathers.
Our forefathers. And we talk a lot this year about those that maybe signed the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, people that were here and they battled for our freedoms.
So let's talk about Kentucky.
But there's some Kentuckians that were really important during these days, right, Tim?
This guy was a man.
Well, surely if you had been reading the last few episodes of the Kentucky Farm Bureau News, you would see that we've been talking about famous historic Kentuckians.
Yes, we have.
So next in line is perhaps the one that most people think of, Daniel Boone.
Daniel Boone, he has a state park.
A forest?
He had a forest. He had a cool hat. I mean, what else do we learn about old Daniel Boone?
Well, unfortunately, Daniel wasn't a great farmer.
So, I mean, we all have our skills.
He was a hunter and a trapper and a surveyor, and he made his way through the Cumberland Gap and made the road for other people to follow. So probably without Daniel Boone, none of us would be here. I'd still be in Norway.
You would be here amazed about the World Cup.
He would be rowing in Times Square.
Yes. So it was very interesting, and I've learned a lot. We have a wonderful resource here at the Kentucky History Center and the Kentucky Historical Society. Those folks are on it, let me tell you what. And so I learned that Daniel Boone, he wasn't very good with the finances either. But you'll have to read the story to hear all this. And Daniel Boone really is buried in Frankfort.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Yes, there was rumors for many years that he had moved to Missouri, and that's where he passed away. And at some point, I think as in 1845, they agreed to bring his remains, he and his wife, back to Kentucky. Well, there was one of those conspiracy theories that they didn't really send old Daniel and Rebecca back, but somebody else. That's not true. I found out that is not true. Daniel's really there, and his grave overlooks the Kentucky River in Frankfort, and it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Yeah, so great podcast today. We somehow tied that to the World Cup.
I dig it.
I dig it. Yeah, the World Cup's been fun.
And just remember, we don't get Tim Thornberry without Daniel Boone.
Right.
That's really the end result of this.
What we learned.
He's a Norway fan, and that's just we can't have that.
We can't be having that. He's All-American now, and he's learning about
Thank God for Daniel Boone.
Daniel Boone today. So
I grew up watching the show, but a young lady named Olivia McCants is a person on our podcast that's coming up, and she knows all about Daniel Boone, works for the Historical Society, and very helpful.
Cool. Yeah.
All right, let's get to it. I'm Renee Carrico.
I'm Matt Hilton.
I'm Tim Thornberry.
Let's get rural.
Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you so much.
So good to see you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us where we are and what you do.
So my name is Olivia McCants, and I work for the Kentucky Historical Society. I am a museum programs coordinator, so I help coordinate and run events for all ages here at the Kentucky History Society of Museums here in Frankfort. So we're sitting in the Thomas D. Clark Center for Kentucky History in downtown Frankfort right now.
Which, for you folks who may not know, this is a very cool place.
It is a very cool place.
Yes. And I had the honor of meeting Dr. Clark often. And he was a brilliant person and a friendly guy. He was just, and always remembered me, whether he really did or not. I always felt like he did. So that's a really, really great experience for me. Also, all right, since we're on the Farm Bureau podcast, we got to mention Farm Bureau a little bit. Olivia has a little bit of Farm Bureau connection here, and I'll let her tell that story.
Yes. So my dad, Jay McCants, ran the Young Farmer program for a long time. And that's what originally brought my family to Kentucky. We moved from Georgia to Kentucky for him to take this job in 2001. And so my childhood was spent going to the Young Farmer outings and all the different trips. We went to Chicago once, Eiffel, all those different things. There were perks to being the boss's kid. I got to go to Eiffel as like an 8-year-old and hang out with all the ag kids. So things like that. So I have a lot of fond memories of growing up doing KFB programs.
Of course, now you're a UK fan. Is that right? Nope. She doesn't have to answer that.
Well, since I work for the state, I'm supposed to be neutral in all things. And so I'm just think I probably better not say one way or the other.
Very, very well put. Olivia, you know that we have been doing in our magazine a little bit of a series of stories about historical figures since we're the country is celebrating 250 years. We thought we would sort of give it a Kentucky flavor. And so far, we've talked about our 16th president, Mr. Lincoln. We've talked about our first governor, Isaac Shelby. Well, you know, we can't talk about Kentucky history unless we talk about Daniel Boone.
I agree.
And so I've been doing a little studying on Mr. Boone. And he's a very fascinating person.
He is.
To say the least. And now I will say this. I'll say it. I won't make Olivia say it. He wasn't the greatest of farmers, but we can't all be great farmers.
Yeah, when I found out that I was doing this program with y'all, and actually the lady who set this up for us, she said, so I know you like Daniel Boone, so they want to come talk about Daniel Boone. I'm like, that's awesome. And there was a long pause. She goes, they want to talk about Daniel Boone and farming. And I go, oh, okay.
We realized quickly that we were going to have to talk more about Daniel Boone being a frontiersman than a farmer.
But, you know, the more I thought about it, farming may not have been one of Daniel Boone's many, many talents. It might not have been his strongest talent, but farming and agriculture and things related to agriculture are a catalyst for several of the big moments of his life, kind of hinge around farming. And so when I thought more about that, of farming more of a catalyst for him rather than just being its own skill, then I definitely think that there is an argument to be made there.
Good. Well, we can get into that then, can't we?
Yes.
But he was born in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And most folks back then, they farmed just so they could eat.
Yes, it was more what we think of as now as subsistence farming is what we, and we don't have that very much in the Western world anymore, but that used to be how most people lived. It was hand to mouth, at least in the frontier part of the region. And Boone lived his whole life in that arena. He was born on the frontier and he lived on the frontier until he died. Now he did move to towns and stuff at different points of his life, but I do think that his whole idea of whether it's life in general or farming is shaped by there are no pre-plowed fields, there are no level ground. Like it was, in fact, I went back and looked. The oldest map I could find of Pennsylvania is from the 1750s. I think it's in the National Archives. And where the Boones lived is off the map. It's not even mapped out. So
really?
His family was so far west that the surveyors hadn't even reached it yet. So he kind of is born off the map and is going to kind of live most of his life that way. And so that whole idea of the struggle to survive this month, the struggle to survive this week, this year is kind of the biggest thing in his life, more than building more of these big, or how it become in the deeper South, the plantation culture that's just totally foreign to the frontier at that time. The forests are huge. There's not a lot of level ground, especially in this state. We all know this. Kentucky's very rocky and very hilly. There are some flat areas, but it's not naturally made for row crops. And so it's going to be tougher on the frontier earlier until they get more developed ground.
Now, if memory serves me correctly, his family moved to North Carolina.
Yes.
And from there is where he came into Kentucky. And I always visualize this painting of him and people around him coming through the Cumberland Gap.
Yes.
And I've heard it called a couple of different things, but that's the Wilderness Road, I think, is what he actually, I read he had 30 axe people and they just chopped their way through the forest and made a road.
So that you're exactly right that the Boones left Pennsylvania partly because they were Quaker and they got kicked out of the Quaker denomination. The Quakers, were famously pacifists, and that was not super in line with living on the frontier. It just was a violent time and a violent area, and it was really difficult to do that. So they did move to the Yadkin Valley, which is where he met his wife and got married to Rebecca Bryan in their teens. But also, I just have to say this because the 250th, that is during that time in North Carolina is where he's also gonna serve under George Washington.
I didn't know that.
So Daniel Boone participated briefly in the French and Indian War, and he was there at the famous Braddock's defeat. So the one where, young George Washington, the one where he famously got all those bullet holes in his coat and lived, that movie that's coming out this year, Young Washington, he was there at that battle. He was a teamster. So he was someone who was helping the supply trains. And so Washington basically is the reason that they're not all killed in that battle, because he assumes command. He's the last major officer standing, and he's only like 23 or something like that. He's very young, and he successfully organizes the retreat so more of the British troops don't die. And Boone is one of those men. So that's crazy. And they would have been about the same age, too, at the time. Boone would have been maybe about 20, maybe around that time. So that's a crazy crossover that Daniel Boone and George Washington fought. Probably their first major combat, or one of their first, was together.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much about history that I don't know. You just, a lot of times in school you hit the high points.
Yes.
And it's probably not until you get maybe into college courses or anything that you get into a little bit deeper dive with everything. So when Boone, why did he come to Kentucky then?
That is a good question. And again, it goes back to this idea of farming being a catalyst for Boone. So when he finishes his service in the War of 1812 and returns home, he has a growing family. He and his wife, Rebecca, are going to go on to have 10 children and adopt a lot more of their nieces and nephews. And they always were taking in orphan children or children who needed a home. He had a lot of mouths to feed. And this subsistence farming is not putting any money in your pocket, because if you're lucky, you have enough to eat until next winter. And so Boone is a man who's talented with a rifle. He's a good hunter. He's a very good tracker. And so he starts doing what are called long hunts to make money. And so what he would do was he would plant his crops in the spring and then hunt in the summer and early fall, going really far for game, not for game, but for furs. He went all the way to Florida once, and that's what's originally going to bring him to Kentucky, is he hears about this land where there are so many animals to hunt. Really plentiful. And so he's going to do that in the summer months, early fall, and then be back in time to harvest. So hopefully you have your crop, but you also have a little bit of pocket change that you've made in those intervening months from selling furs, because furs were worth a ton of money on the East Coast, mostly because if you think about it, in Europe, especially in England, there's no private land ownership at the time. So it's not like the common people could go hunt fur for furs and get pelts, because the aristocracy owns all the land. So that drove the price. It wasn't super expensive here in the U.S., but it would have just been the colonies at the time. But if you could sell it to England, you could make a lot of money. That never, ever, ever worked out for Boone, but that was always his plan throughout his life, was maybe if I can do the farming thing, get started, but actually do my real thing I'm good at, which is hunt, I can make a little extra money. But his furs kept getting confiscated. When he first came to Kentucky, he was stopped by the Shawnee, and they're basically saying, you're poaching. This is our land. So we're not going to kill you, but we're going to take your furs because they rightfully belong to us. So he kept going home empty-handed, and that he's sinking further and further into debt each year. So every year he does this whole crop, hunt, harvest routine, never works out. And so he's in real danger of going to debtor's prison. And so because he's one of the few woodsmen who's been to Kentucky, a surveying company called the Transylvania Company, they sign a treaty with the Cherokee to buy up most of what is now Kentucky. Wasn't super legally binding because England didn't own that land at the time. Like, they had no legal right to buy it, but they need somebody to help survey it for them, somebody to cut a road, and there aren't very many people who've been there. So it happens that the judge who's hearing his indebtedness case is one of the guys in this venture. And so he ends up basically giving Boone the opportunity to clear his debt, not go to prison, debtor's prison, by going to Kentucky and opening the Wilderness Road. And so Boone loves Kentucky. He wants to bring his family here anyway. So he accepts, and in 1773, he and the axemen, the few guys, cut the Wilderness Road, which is the first road into Kentucky. And it's only wide enough for a pack horse or maybe a hand cart, but it's enough to bring your family with you. They needed something wide enough, not just a lone hunter, but if you're going to colonize a place, you have to be able to bring your wives, your children, and your belongings and your animals. They brought, again, going back to agriculture, they brought farm animals, some cattle and things with them to Kentucky. So that's what I mean when I say that that's the first instance of farming not being a means to an end, but it is a catalyst for him indirectly coming to Kentucky.
Absolutely. And that road would become a major thoroughfare for other settlers to follow. Is that correct?
It did. It was the gateway it was the original gateway to the West. We think of the arch in St. Louis being that, but that was the original gateway to the West, bringing people here. And they came and founded Fort Herod. Is founded in 1774, so that's the first permanent settlement, and then Fort Boonesborough, which Boone founds, is in 1775, where he brings his family. And so we're in the 250th this year, and so 76 is the year that most people are really thinking about. And there was, on the frontier, they knew that Lexington and Concord had happened. You know, it took months to reach us, but we kind of knew we were at war with England, but it hadn't really reached the frontier yet. The British were too concerned with Washington's army on the East Coast. But in 76, with the Declaration of Independence, this becomes, oh, this is official. These people are rebelling against us. And so the British begin paying the different tribes, like the Shawnee. They began gathering native allies who were understandably already very upset that these new settlers are encroaching on their space and taking over their land. And so the British are basically paying them to attack settlements, inciting, because there had been few skirmishes, but it hadn't been an all-out war until 76 after the Declaration. And the Declaration reaches Kentucky in early August of 1776, and it's read aloud at the different forts. And so places like Fort Boonesborough then begin flying the American flag, whatever iteration that looked like at the time, to acknowledge that they were siding with the American colonists against England. So they declare loyalty to the new colonial cause, and that's going to cause a whole host of issues heading into the war.
Wow, all this is pretty fascinating, and I say that because, and I'm sure you've heard of this. I was a kid of the '60s growing up, and there was a very popular television show.
Oh yes,
that starred a fellow by the name of Fess Parker, and suddenly his image became what a lot of people thought. That's what Daniel Boone's like. You know, he's tall and coonskin cap, and you know, he's all these many different things, and which Boone was not.
Yes.
You know, and so you know, I'm sure they took lots of liberties on the show, but it became very popular. It ran for 6 or 7 years and was a very highly rated TV show at the time. And certainly I was a kid who had a replica long rifle and a coonskin cap.
Naturally.
You know?
Yes.
So, as did most, you know, 7-year-old kids back then. So, you know, I think through the years there's probably been a lot of misconceptions about who Daniel Boone was and what he was really like and what he really did.
In my experience, he is much cooler than any type of fiction. I mean, it's much more compelling than you have almost kind of like the Marvel movies type hero who never has any struggles or problems. He's just kind of like Superman. I guess it'd be DC, but it's like Superman where, you know, things just bounce off of him. He always knows what to do. But I think it's much more a testament of the human spirit and the American spirit to have someone who is struggling and doesn't know what to do and is facing adversity and trying to figure out what to do for themselves and their family, all while balancing leadership roles, balancing a really volatile political situation, and also trying to figure out how to survive and thrive in a very hostile environment. I think that's much more compelling than just some superhero-like figure.
I agree, and correct me if I'm wrong. I read a little bit about that he sort of became a before there were DC Comics and things like that, but he was did I read correctly that he was sort of known? He was sort of a folk hero of sorts, maybe something he wasn't crazy about.
He was
being
not,
known for.
But that the biggest instance where he becomes being a national figure is he's kind of known in frontier circles. He's a very well acknowledged leader in Kentucky. In 76, what's going to give him national fame and national attention is what happened in July of 1776. I mean, we're almost there. We're thinking about the Declaration, but in Kentucky, the big thing that happened was the taking and rescue of his daughter, Jemima Boone. That's in mid-July in 1776, where his 13-year-old daughter and two of her friends, the Callaway girls, were kidnapped by a Shawnee war party. And Daniel Boone and the group of men from Boonesboro are able to accurately predict where they're going and track them for 3 days and rescue the girls. And the girls were unharmed. And stories like that were pretty rare. When people vanish, it's kind of... it's hard to get them back. And so that capture and rescue of Jemima is what's going to start making him known at national circles. I mean, it's a huge part of the American imagination now. James Fenimore Cooper actually it's believed based Last of the Mohicans off of that story. So if you've ever read the book or the really famous movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, they were inspired by this story. That's how much it took hold of the national consciousness. And so that's going to make him really famous. Starting in 1776. And then in 1777, I mentioned farming. Another instance where farming is a big deal is in 77. Boonesboro did have some crops. They had gardens and things like that. But in 1777 is when the full brunt of British control tries to reach the frontier. And so the fighting is so bad on the frontier that the people of Boonesboro are not able to leave the stockade to farm. And so by winter of 77, they're about to starve to death. And so all they have to eat are meat that they've been able to hunt. But to have meat, to preserve it, you have to have salt. They were almost out of salt. And so Boone and a group of guys from Boonesboro make a daring midwinter trip to a salt licks where they end up getting captured by the Shawnee for months. Some of the men never are able to escape. And so again, that's another instance of farming's not directly connected, but it is a catalyst for him being captured of not having enough food. And he's going to stay in Shawnee captivity for several months. He's adopted by the chief Blackfish at the time. The British tried to buy him and they wouldn't sell because he's already famous enough where you have the British and the Shawnee fighting over who gets to keep Daniel Boone. And so the Shawnee, he finds out they're going to raid Boonesboro in fall of 1778. And so and another funny thing is he is forced to farm for the Shawnee. So they make him hoeing crops and stuff for the captors people. Yeah. And he was, according to he was insulted by that.
Well, had they only known, they probably would have sold him.
They're like, no, don't keep him as a farmer. But he is able to escape farming again and his Shawnee captors. And he was being held at Chillicothe, Ohio. So he makes a 150-mile trip in 5 days on foot most of the way. He crosses the Ohio River without a boat, makes it, and beats the Shawnee back to Boonesboro to warn the fort and his family. And he was in his early 40s by this time, so he's not super young. And then Boonesboro withstands the longest siege on the Kentucky frontier of 12 days and nights of warfare, where the fort is in real danger of utter collapse. So with Boonesboro is saved because of a freak rainstorm that happens during the dry season. The Shawnee at one point were resorting to fire arrows because they knew the fort was out of water and couldn't put them out. And then it rained. And the settlers... it's how, in the fall when we have a dry season, and man, these settlers who were also farmers were really grateful. What they said was they were certain that divine providence had sent this rain to save them and to spare the fort, to spare their lives. Yeah. So that was crazy. And so he's going to continue to serve on the frontier in other things like the Battle of Blue Licks, which was a huge American loss at the end of the Revolutionary War. But he's very famous by this point, between this crazy true story of rescuing his daughter and then escaping captivity and beating them back to the fort and then withstanding a siege and then leading Kentucky troops. It's crazy. And so he's famous. By the end of the Revolutionary War, Boone is well known, and he would have met people like Thomas Jefferson because he's well known enough to be elected as a representative representing Kentucky, which was part of Virginia at the time. So like Kentucky County, he's representing Kentuckians in Virginia in the capital. So Thomas Jefferson was the governor at the time. So the chances of him meeting Boone are very high if he's a legislator and Jefferson's the governor at the time. Reportedly, Boone refused to wear a suit and wore his buckskins to sessions, which I kind of think Thomas Jefferson would have appreciated.
That is, I think I knew that, but so he's a frontiersman, he's a soldier.
Yes.
He's a political person.
Yes.
And a reluctant hero.
Yes. And your point is exactly right, that at the end, sadly, the sad part of the story is when Kentucky becomes its own state in 1792, the need for frontiersmen, people like Daniel Boone, Simon Kenton, goes away. And so the men with these really needed skill set that helped Kentucky get to where they were, people kind of started overlooking and thinking, well, we need the politicians now. We need the statesmen now. And so there were a few men who were able to make that crossover switch from frontiersman and soldier to politician, like Isaac Shelby, made it successfully.
You did.
Boone was not one of those people. He was not able to adapt to the new way of the world. So he has a lot of court trouble, going back to money problems, going back to court problems, and he's going to end up leaving Kentucky entirely. And end up living the rest of his life in Missouri. But in 1845, Kentuckians kind of felt badly for the way that things ended with Boone, and so they petitioned his family to have his body and Rebecca's body moved back to our state capital so that they could be properly honored by the people of Kentucky, and that's where they still are, here in Frankfort, in the cemetery up on the hill. I
visited that
the
other day and ran into a couple from another part of the state, and they were all up on the mystery of Daniel Boone his body coming back from Missouri. He says, I don't think he's really there. I said, well,
that's a common thing that we get, which is very baffling to me because Missouri doesn't claim to have him.
Yeah.
The marker where he was buried in Missouri says removed to Kentucky. So, and the fact is his children who were still alive were the ones that dug him up.
Oh, wow.
Like living family members.
Yes.
It was his children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews who were pallbearers and helped to move. And we have all the records in our collection of people like Thomas Metcalf, who was, Kentucky governor, people writing, politicians, documenting what they're writing to the Boones, going back and forth. And so there's just no historical evidence that he's not buried here in Frankfort.
Folks, we have debunked that misinformation. Anybody thinking it's not him there, it is.
I know some people have very strong opinions. I have a very strong opinion that he is here. Now, Missouri does claim you may have Boone's bones, but we have his heart. And we'll give him that.
That's a nice way of putting it. But it's a beautiful site there.
It is.
Overlooking the Kentucky River and the capital.
It is. But there's a lot of those Boone myths built into that monument. He's wearing a coonskin cap on his grave.
He is, yes.
Which he never wore. And he's also portrayed as just not even just as an Indian fighter, Native American, not the type of frontier diplomat that he was, and kind of preferring to use violence as a last resort. And I think what you were talking about earlier, reluctant to fame, one of my very favorite Boone quotes, and we have it in we have a temporary exhibit here talking about kind of the myth and reality of early Kentucky settlement that's on display here now. And my favorite quote of Boone is, the world has, it's something like, with me, the world has taken great liberties, and yet I have been but a common man. And so that's how he saw himself. And I love that. We have it on the wall in the exhibit, and that's one of my very favorite of his quotes.
There's my headline.
Yeah.
I've got it. Okay. I'm done. No. Fascinating. And, again, it's some of those things, such as a television show and things like that. You grow up hearing different things and, having these visions of who this man really was and what he did. I would ask this. Is it fair to say that without him, I'm sure Kentucky would have been settled, but was he one of the most instrumental people in bringing others to the West? Yes,
I would say that's fair to say, especially since with his fame, it brings a level of trust that maybe people who aren't as well known, like Benjamin Logan or James Herod, don't enjoy, which is when you're trying to gather groups of people to go to a settlement. You're going to go with the guy with the name recognition, the person who people know, they know what they're doing. They've been there before. They've endured XYZ. And so Boone, throughout his life, was very good at rallying people and good at getting loyalty from people. And so I do think that having that fame, even though it was unwanted, did build a level of trust that few frontiersmen enjoyed, of people thinking, man, this guy really has it together and will be able to tell us what we need to do. This is an unknown frontier situation, but he knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. Even if Boone didn't always know what he was doing, he projected stability and leadership and being calm under pressure. And so I think those were valuable qualities. People don't want to go into a frontier with a hothead, necessarily someone who's going to fly off the handle. And so I think that's something that he brings that maybe the other frontiersmen who weren't as well known. And he is the first person to start gathering up families to come here. I mean, he's responsible for helping lead the way for the road to be open. So I do think that's a fair assessment of him. He left, very much shaped the state as we know it today, leaving this lasting legacy of building and convincing people to stick it out and stay here. That was a thing. Another thing, a lot of people quit and gave up. And he's like, no, we can make it. We can build these homes. We can build this life if we're just willing to sacrifice for it, if we're willing to work hard. And so I do think that's something unique that he brought to our state history.
That's pretty fascinating to think about that. I've been to the Cumberland Gap. Mm-hmm. Okay, that it's a national park now, and you're up there, and you can see, there's something that says you can see 5 states from here. I cannot help but think what that area looked like then, and how in the world anybody came through there to create what was a road mm-hmm. through that massive wilderness, which 250 years ago mm-hmm. was even more so, even more daunting. What a task in front of him to have completed that.
Yes, he was, and I do think this is an interesting time with your earlier series on Isaac Shelby and kind of how what the state needed changed, is when he was older, kind of one of Boone's last ditch efforts to kind of gain back what he had lost in Kentucky was he wrote Isaac Shelby asking, they were looking to enlarge and work on the Wilderness Road, and Boone was like, I'm your man, I helped cut it. And we don't have record that Isaac Shelby ever answered that letter. So it's an interesting again, what the state needed moved mm-hmm. On from the frontiersmen and the settlers, and Boone sadly was not someone who was able to make that transition like Isaac Shelby was. Both were men who accomplished great things in their own right, but they definitely fed off of each other. You don't have one without the other.
So we have Daniel Boone to thank for us being here.
I mean, I think so.
I think so too. The more that you learn about history, I was in the 7th grade, and there was a teacher that she taught Kentucky history, and up to that point, my knowledge of Kentucky history was whatever I saw on television or what little we had read in school up to that point. So she really opened the door on a lot of these things as far as Daniel Boone and some early people in Kentucky. So it's a very fascinating story. The Daniel Boone TV show is still on.
It is still on, and I watched it as a kid. I enjoyed that show, and I will say it's very dramatized. But I will say that I do think that Fess Parker did a good job of portraying kind of the calm, stabilizing, let's try diplomacy first side of Boone's character. I do think that he did a fair job representing kind of the personality, or at least as much as we can tell of someone's personality from the historical record, as because he was always the calm, the peacemaker. Let's figure this out. Kind of the person that people came to for wisdom, and I do think that he did a good job of at least portraying that part of Boone's character.
And I think he was known the rest of his career as probably either Davy Crockett or Daniel Boone.
Yeah, and the why that show confuses so many people as conflating the two of Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone, even though they were not really contemporaries, is because Fess Parker played both. Yes. And Walt Disney did Davy Crockett with him, and it was such a huge success that television wanted to pick it up to be a series, but Disney wouldn't sell the rights to Davy Crockett. And so they basically poached their star and picked a different frontiersman and basically made Davy Crockett again. So it was a marketing ploy that paid off really well.
Absolutely.
But that is why I was very confused as a kid. Like, why are they look the same?
Yes, they sure did. Well, there's a lot of fascinating. You say we've got some things here at the History Center? We
do. There's some really cool things in our collection. Like I said, we have two new exhibits for America 250 that are opened. One's called Courage in the Commonwealth, and that's that one will be here through Thanksgiving, where it's kind of weapons used in the frontier, cool things like that. Like we have a knife that belonged to George Rogers Clark, and that's on loan from a kind donor that's letting us borrow those. But our main temporary exhibit is focusing on history and memory. So it's Revolution to Statehood, Kentucky's history and memory. So thinking about Kentucky's founding and history and memory. So going back to what do we know for sure from the historical record from our founding, and piecing together what are these myths that we've all consumed from popular culture, because the truth is usually stranger than fiction. And so we have things on display like Kentucky's original Constitution from 1792, which is very rarely on display to the public. We have a cannon that was at Valley Forge, which is crazy. Wow. And the Battle of Saratoga, this cannon's been through a lot. We have one of the cool things, if you're interested in Boone, is we have a plaster cast that was taken of his skull when his body was moved to Frankfurt. So
wow,
when who
thought to do that?
We believe it was someone who was trying to do a phrenology reading that debunked pseudoscience. You could tell a person's character by the bumps on their head. We believe that that's what they were trying to do, but we also found the phrenology reading, and basically they deduced that he was brave and an explorer. So nothing we could have gotten without digging him up and messing with his skull. But that's also, so it's kind of death mask a little bit, and it's on display as well.
That is wild. There's so many great things here. And since we started doing these, obviously you folks have been a tremendous help. But if folks out there haven't visited, they need to.
Absolutely.
It's a really cool place.
It's also good to know that we don't just run the Thomas D. Clark Center, but there's two other buildings here in Frankfurt that we also run, and it's one price admission. So we also run Kentucky's Old State Capitol. So if you've ever wanted to see the Old State House, especially since the current Capitol's closed, until further notice for renovation, ours is open. So it was built in 1830. It was completed in 1830. So that's over there. Daniel Boone's portrait but usually hangs next to George Washington in the House of Representatives up there. So again, and that's where he and Rebecca Boone lay in state before they reburied them. So that building has Boone history, and then we also run the Military History Museum in the Old State Arsenal from 1850 up on the hill here in Frankfort, and that building was attacked twice by the Confederacy during the Civil War. So a lot of history here. That's one price admission for all 3 sites, and all 3 are within walking distance. So if you've never been here and you like Kentucky history, I mean, we are your people.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Olivia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Enlightening us about Daniel Boone, and we appreciate it. And I'm sure that we were going to do a short series, but I've gotten so interested in this. We got to find some other folks to talk about.
There's some amazing ones out there. And I was going to say there's a lot, if people are interested in Boone, there are so many good biographies out there now. One thing that I found really helpful is on kind of piecing together what's true and what's not is Daniel Boone's youngest son, Nathan, talked to a historian, and the historian transcribed basically their family history from his child while he was alive, and it's published and you can buy it, which is crazy.
Wow.
So it's usually published in a book called My Father, Daniel Boone, and it was a historian that interviewed Nathan Boone, which was Daniel and Rebecca's youngest child, and wrote down all the questions and answers. Yeah. And so that's a really good resource for a primary source of what was he like and what was living on the frontier as a child like.
Well, I'm sure you can get it at Amazon.
You sure can. You sure can get it at Amazon.
Now we're plugging Amazon. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. And for all you folks out there who wants to get a little bit more involved in history, here's your place.
Yes, absolutely.
Come and see these great folks. They'll take care of you.